From saving
निकली
the
है
Union
कवर
from
from
total collapse to staring down nuclear annihilation,
चलो पिस्टल लेकर चल
onto
रही
the
उड़ाने के लिए
chest
किसी
and
बोले
still
कौन में
delivering a
पता इसके
90-minute speech.
जेल
These are
लो
the 10
भैया
greatest
जेल लो
presidents in
ठीक
American
ही कह रहे
history.
हैं भाई साहब
These guys were so
ठीक ही
legendary,
कह
they
रहे
made the
हैं
rest look like amateur hour. Sorry,
दूरियों के
Buchanan.
दम
But first
मेरे
is Calvin Coolidge,
बेकरारियां
who isn't
मेरी
exactly a household name.
यार
In
तुम
fact, most people would say,
मेरे
wasn't he that quiet dude? And yeah, they called him Silent Cal because he barely spoke. Legend has it, a dinner guest once told him, I made a bet I could get more than 2 words out of you. Coolidge looked at her and said, you lose. Good one, sir. But although he wasn't chatty, Coolidge was effective. He inherited a country drowning in scandal. Before him, Warren G. Harding and his cronies looted the government and stuffed their pockets with cash on the way out the door. So Silent Cal cleaned house, restored public trust, and presided over one of the most prosperous decades in American history, the Roaring '20s. Under his watch, taxes went down, the economy boomed, and the national debt got slashed. Life was pretty good. She'll have a gin martini, extra dry. So no, Coolidge didn't give big speeches or start massive programs. He just got out of the way and let America thrive. But speaking of golden eras, next up is James Madison. At just 5'4" and 100 pounds soaking wet, Madison was the smallest president in U.S. history. But don't let the size fool you. He was an intellectual giant. Cause long before he ever stepped foot in the White House, Madison earned the title of Father of the Constitution. He drafted most of the documents and the Bill of Rights. So when Madison took office in 1809, he knew the playbook better than anyone alive. And it's a good thing he did, because Britain was starting trouble again. They were boarding American ships, kidnapping sailors, and forcing them to serve in the Royal Navy. Hey, get your hands off him! So America entered the War of 1812, also known as the Second War of Independence, because Britain clearly wanted a rematch after losing the first time. And while the U.S. didn't gain any territory, and yeah, the White House might have went up in flames, it was still a victory, because Madison sent a message loud and clear. America wasn't going to be bullied anymore. You tell them, sir! And a wave of patriotism swept over the nation. But if we're being honest, none of that could have happened without this next president. Andrew Jackson, a dude so tough, he once got shot in the chest during a duel and still killed the other guy. No joke, he literally walked away with a bullet in his chest for the rest of his life. Sir, would you like a doctor to look at that? But Jackson wasn't just a fighter, he was a man of the people. Cause before him, every president came from the elite, wealthy families, Ivy League education, and powdered wigs. But Jackson, he was born poor, raised tough, and clawed his way to the top. And that grit showed up on the battlefield. Cause during the War of 1812, Jackson led a ragtag militia into the Battle of New Orleans and crushed a British army twice the size. The victory was so legendary, it catapulted him to national hero status, and eventually into the White House. But while everyday Americans were cheering, the elites were sweating. Cause old boy did Old Hickory come in swinging. He dismantled the second bank of the United States, an institution he viewed as a monster that propped up corrupt elites and crushed the common man. And when he was finished, Jackson became the only president in U.S. history to completely wipe out the national debt. Yep, $0. Which sounds insane when you look at the $38 trillion we got today. But before Miss Flappy yells at me, we gotta be honest. Jackson's legacy isn't all glory and grit. His treatment of Native Americans, especially the forced relocation known as the Trail of Tears, was devastating. A permanent stain on his presidency that just can't be ignored. Which is why he's below this next president, John F. Kennedy, the youngest elected president in American history. Charismatic, handsome, and ridiculously quotable. Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. But JFK wasn't just smooth talk. When the Soviets placed nuclear missiles in Cuba, just 90 miles from Florida, the world came within inches of nuclear war. For 13 straight days, humanity held its breath. His generals wanted him to invade, but JFK kept cool, negotiated, and got the missiles removed without firing a single shot. Now that's what I call leadership, sir. But JFK didn't just save us from World War III. He also looked to the stars. Because he launched the space race and challenged America to do the impossible. Put a man on the moon by the end of the decade. I'm ready for liftoff, sir. But tragically, JFK would never live to see it happen. But before we explored the stars, we actually expanded westward with James Polk, who might be the most underrated president ever. Because when Polk took office in 1845, he made 4 promises. 1. Acquire California. 2. Settle the Oregon boundary. 3. Lower tariffs. And 4. Establish an independent treasury. And unlike most politicians who are all talk and no follow-through, Polk actually delivered on every single promise. He expanded the United States by over 1.2 million square miles through the annexation of Texas, the Oregon Treaty, and the Mexican Cession, which added California, Nevada, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, and parts of Colorado, Wyoming, Kansas, and Oklahoma. That's more territory than any other president in U.S. history. But here's the craziest part. He promised to serve only 1 term. And in classic Polk fashion, he kept that promise too. Polk got in, got it done, and got out. Man, I wish most politicians worked like that. Hey, are you trading stocks again? But unlike Polk, who served 1 quick term, Franklin Delano Roosevelt was elected 4 times in a row. And there's a reason Americans kept voting for him. Because when FDR took office in 1933, America was falling apart. The Great Depression destroyed the economy. Unemployment hit 25%, and people were literally starving. And FDR's response? The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Great pep talk, sir, but I think we need to help put food on the table. So FDR got to work and launched the New Deal, a package of programs that put millions back to work, created Social Security, and rebuilt the country from the ground up. Bridges, dams, roads, national parks. A lot of what you see today was built under FDR. You like the Hoover Dam? New Deal. The Blue Ridge Parkway? New Deal. Thousands of post offices, courthouses, and schools? All New Deal, baby. But even that was nothing compared to what came next. World War II. Because FDR didn't just lead, he transformed America into a global superpower. In 1939, America had a smaller army than Portugal. But by 1945, we had 12 million soldiers in the most powerful military on Earth. Hoorah! And back home, he built what he called the arsenal of democracy, converting American factories into a war machine that produced more planes, tanks, and ships than anyone thought was possible. Oh, and I almost forgot to mention that he did all of this from a wheelchair. Polio had paralyzed his legs in 1921, and he never walked unassisted again. But FDR obviously didn't let it stop him. He wore heavy leg braces, stood tall for speeches, and carefully hid his disability from the public. Because he knew more than anyone, the country needed to see strength. Jeez, I'm over here complaining about my toe fungus. What? It's a serious condition, okay? But if you thought FDR was impressive, get ready for Thomas Jefferson. The man who wrote all men are created equal. And then spent his presidency proving it
तो
wasn't
में
just a
चौधरी बनते
slogan.
ना जो चौधरी बनेगा भैया
Mostly.
वो बात
He
उल्टा
wrote
बोलने
about
में
liberty
पिटेगा
while owning slaves.
कोई भाई इनकी
Despised big
और इनके
government,
पटे में कोई
yet
टांग अड़ा हुआ
expanded
था
presidential power.
बात
A
ये
man of
है
his time,
वो
yet
आदमी ना है
somehow
लायक
centuries ahead of it. And it took exactly that kind of
वो
paradoxical
अपनी अपनी
brilliance
कहते हैं
to pull
अब
off
जे
the Louisiana Purchase,
अब
which
जे
might
ने
be
गेट
the
जे करवा रहे हैं
greatest
ठीक है
real estate deal
हाल
in
में तो जो
history.
कौन ने
Because
जे
when
जे करवा रहे हैं
Napoleon
जो
was broke,
मतलब
losing
साइड
wars
में
in
कम जगह
Europe,
जाने
and
वेल्डिंग करा बड़े
desperate for
करवा
some
दूं मैं बाकी
cash,
की जो टेल मरवा
Jefferson
दूंगा
slid in with an offer.
सोच रहा हूँ मैं कल लोकल
15
जाएगा वो
million
टेल लगवा
for the
दूंगा
entire
फिर मैं सोची
Louisiana
पेंट करवा दूंगी
territory.
जहाँ पे बस बात खत्म
828,000 square miles,
खर्चा
for
होगा
roughly 3 cents an acre.
हाँ
Napoleon agreed, and just like that, Jefferson
पेंट वेंट
doubled
होगा
the
काम
size of
खत्म
the United
और
States
कोई बात
with a
ना
single signature. That's like
अरे
buying
हाँ
all of
यार थोड़ा
Manhattan
बुरा
for
लगा
a
तो मैं करा
pizza.
लूँ सही
Extra cheese. And with that
उन्हें
one
गेटन तो
deal,
बड़ी
Jefferson
समस्या है
bought
डो
land
करने
that would eventually become
अब
15
अब का होगा
states.
देख
Louisiana,
अब इनके गेट
Arkansas,
की कोई तो रोज
Missouri,
कुंडी लगा के जाकर
Iowa,
चुपचाप जब रात को
Oklahoma,
सो करेंगे 2
Kansas,
बजे आकर वो कैसे
Nebraska,
हो
Minnesota,
और इनके
North
गेट की कोई
Dakota,
कुंडी लगा
South
चला जाएगा
Dakota,
सभी
New
जब बिलबिला
Mexico,
करेंगे उठ
Texas,
तो
Montana,
बुलाएंगे क्या
Wyoming,
बुलाएंगे
and Colorado.
बना जाओ
Oh, and parts of Canada
3-4
too.
बार करना
Fine weather we're having, eh?
और कमी कैमरा
But
लगा
Jefferson didn't stop there. He wanted to know exactly what America
ए
had just
यार
bought.
इतना आदमी
So he
नीच
sent
है
in
वो
Lewis
ये
and Clark and
कि मैं तो
instructed
कुछ
them
कह ना
to
सका
document everything. Plants, animals, rivers,
बढ़ती उम्र के सामने
mountains.
आदमी कह रहा है मैं
If
जूता
it
लाया
existed
मेरी
west
पैंट
of
लाया
the
नहीं
Mississippi,
मैं ये सब तो ले आया वो
Jefferson
थोड़ी
wanted
क्यों
it
मैं
in
मनी मन में करो मैं नोड़ी
So
मैं जिंदगी
Lewis and
बर्बाद
Clark
करके डालते
embarked
वो
on their
कैसे कैसे रह
famous
रही हूँ वो जानते
expedition and mapped a path all the way to the
बताओ।
Pacific Ocean. Not
जब वो
bad
यहाँ
for
आएंगे
just
तब
3
कह रहे कि
cents
भैया
an
कोई
acre.
नौकरी मिल
But
जाएगी नौकरी मतलब
overseas,
प्राइवेट जॉब में कर
Jefferson
लूँ
had another fight
मैं
on
काव
his
कर रही है
hands. The
कैसा ही है
Barbary
जिंदगी
Wars.
में काय कर
A
घरे का
conflict
में
where
घर है ना
North
वो माल में
African
चीजें
pirates
कैसे
were
बिगड़ते हैं
kidnapping American sailors
मैं
and
बाप ने तो नहीं
demanding
समझी
ransom. Jefferson took one look at the ransom, laughed, and
मैं
sent in
कच्चू
the
से पैसे लाए ऐसे
Marines.
होते हैं तो मैं खुद करने
Hoorah!
चाहिए
To the shores of Tripoli isn't just a line from a Marine Corps song. It's because
हाँ, तो
Jefferson
उनसे डीजी
literally
यार।
said no more. The guy was a straight-up Renaissance man.
अपनी बेटी की इतनी
Architect,
जिंदगी ऐसे कर दी
inventor, philosopher, president.
और जब तुम्हें
But
इतने करनो
America
के जे
wasn't
सब
done
आठ करने
producing
ऐसी चीज करनी तो बढ़िया घर में
larger-than-life
करते ना मोड़ी
Because up next is Theodore Roosevelt, the
इतनी
most
बात कर दो
badass
कोई
president
गुंडे
to
जाए
ever
उससे
live.
लड़ाई है जाती
And honestly, it's not even close. This guy got shot in the chest while giving a speech and didn't even flinch. He opened his
ना
coat,
तो भैया
saw
4
the
रिश्तेदारों में
blood
बात
spreading
होगी
across
मैं तो
his
क्या
shirt,
भैया
and
किराए पे
told the
देते हैं
crowd,
मोड़ी
it takes more than that to kill a bull
गलत
moose.
कहा है
Then proceeded to finish a
गलत कहा
90-minute
है
speech with a bullet lodged near his heart.
गलत क्या है इसमें?
Absolute
सच तो सच है
But here's the crazy part.
तुम अगर सच
Teddy
का सामना
wasn't
नहीं कर
always a
सकते तो
tough
बेकार
guy.
हो कैसी जिंदगी
As a
जी रहे हो
kid, he was sickly, weak, and had
इन
severe
लोगों ने जो किया ही है
asthma. So his father told him, "You have the mind, but not the body.
हमने
You
तो
must
खूब करो
make
करूँ
your body." And
हमने
Teddy
तो
took
खूब करो
that
मैं
to
शायद
heart.
ऐसा मान जाए
Because
तो
he
मानो
began
नहीं बाबा
lifting
मानो
weights, boxing,
लेकिन
hiking
अच्छे थे याद
mountains,
है मैं
hunting
जब तक
bears,
बाद में भाई
and
बात
forced
दीपक भैया
himself
भाभी
into
आएगा
one of
उन्हें
the
दुकान
toughest
बढ़वा दी
men in
उनसे कहकर उनके
America.
दुकान पे ये बात
USA,
तो भाई ने
USA.
अरे देखो सही नहीं है
And
जो
that
भी है
grit
तुम
earned
घर
him
आ
enough
जाओ
respect to
मैं
lead
अगर
the
तेरे सामने
Rough
में ऊपर
Riders,
बैठा हो
a
तो इल्लम डरो
volunteer
भाई
cavalry
ठीक है
unit that charged
तो
up San Juan
जो
Hill in
हमें
the
फोटो करवे के लिए बुलाओ
Spanish-American
गए अरे
War.
पापा फोटो
He
घेना
ended up
मैं
winning the
हमने नहीं
Medal of
यार
Honor for that one.
ठीक है
But as
जोकर को
president,
कहा जाए
he
बाबू
was known as a
अरे हट
trust
नहीं यार
buster.
जाने जाओ चलो
Because
और
at the
फोटो
turn
कराओ
of the century,
हाँ
massive
बहुत बड़े
monopolies
ताजमहल में
ran
बैठ
the
कर तुम
show.
फोटो करा रहे हो ना
Standard Oil, U.S. Steel, and the
अब
railroad barons
अब लग
grew
रहा
so
ब्रो
massive they controlled the economy from top to bottom.
तो
So as
पता
a
ना
result,
पड़े चीजें
Teddy
ऐसे
filed
अब मैं
44
संक्रांत को टाइम
antitrust lawsuits,
ठीक है मैंने मम्मी
broke
को
up
नहीं गई
Standard
मैंने कहा
Oil
मम्मी जी
into
सब
34 separate
मम्मी वहाँ में नेक
companies,
कम हरा
and
भी
put
ना
corporations on
पल्लू
notice.
में न्यो करके जो
You
दुबका
will
दुबका के
play
चीज
by
लेके
the
जाते
rules,
हैं और कोई चीज लेके
which
आवे तो
truly set the
ले आएगा वो
standard
बैग
for
से दे
government
पापा जानने
regulation
मत
of big business.
हमें वो दिखाता है
But when he
हमको
wasn't
चूती है
taking down monopolies, Teddy was
बात
out
नहीं है
protecting
सब दिख रहा
nature.
है
Cause he
तुम्हें ऐसा
also
पल्लू
created
दुबका
the
करे जब तुम
National Park
कटिया में
System,
डरे होंगे ना तब तुम
protecting
कहोगे ना ऐसे ही
230
ऐसे ही हम
million
चुपचाप कानून में
acres
लीड
of
लगा के
public
लेकर जा
land for
करेंगे
future generations. Thanks to
ऐसे
Teddy,
चुपचाप
we have
अरे
Yellowstone,
पानी
the
तक नहीं
Grand
दे रहे माँ
Canyon,
बाप को यही लायक हो
Yosemite,
तुम
and some of the most beautifully
माँ बुला लो अपने
protected
बच्चे
land on
भाई
Earth.
जो भी है
Heck, I can fly freely without being hunted.
माँ
Thank
की
you,
ऐसी
sir.
माहौन करी है इन
Oh,
लोगों ने
and did I mention he read a
बहुत
book a
ज्यादा
day, wrote 35 books
दुनिया में
himself,
वर्ल्ड वॉर
spoke
होते हैं ना
French
हमें वर्ल्ड
and
वॉर
German, was a champion boxer, and
कर
the
का
teddy
फैन
bear is named after him. Yeah,
क्या ही बोले
Teddy
यार इन
Roosevelt
लोगों के
didn't just
बारे में
occupy the presidency, he dominated it. Not bad for a kid with asthma. Here's your inhaler, sir. But speaking of dominating the Oval Office,
अब तो मैं
next
जानो
up,
ही
we
है
got Abraham Lincoln,
जयपुर
the man
तो
who
अपने
saved
दवा
the
ले जाओ
Union. Cause when Lincoln took office in
गाड़ी भी चला के ले जाओ नहीं तो
1861,
वो पे गाड़ी
the
कर ले
country
जाओ
was
तुम्हारे
already
बढ़िया जी
coming
कोई
apart at the seams.
बोल दो
7 states had seceded before he was even
तो शायद दे मतलब की बात
inaugurated, and
लगाते
within
लेकिन
weeks,
हमें मुंह बहुत अच्छी
full-blown
है
civil war. A war that would go on to claim
फायदा
over 600,000 American lives.
फायदा अब फायदा जे हाँ तो अपनी जान दे दो
conflict
तब
in
हमें खुशी
American
मिलेगी कि
history.
हाँ तुमने गलत करो तुमने
But
जवाब के लिए
even when
अपनी
the
जान
country
दे मर गए
seemed
तुम
beyond
ठीक है
saving, Lincoln stood tall.
हर आदमी
Multiple
को
generals
दुनिया में
failed
गलत
under
काम
his
की सजा
command.
मिलनी चाहिए
His
और
cabinet
मिलती
doubted him, and the public begged him to quit.
तुमने अपनी
But
बेटी को
Lincoln
शोषण करवा दो
refused. He kept replacing generals, kept pushing
ऊपर
forward,
वालों कबू कभी
and
सही कर
never
बना था अगर
quit
ऊपर
on
वाला छोड़
preserving
देगा तो
the
तुम भूखे
Union.
मत जाओगे
And in 1863, he issued the Emancipation Proclamation,
मैं
declaring
ऐसे
that
चाहता हूँ
all
मैं
slaves
पट्टा
in
पे रहे।
Confederate states shall be then, thenceforward, and forever free. It
ठीक
didn't
है।
free everyone overnight. that would take the 13th Amendment, but it
इनने
did
कब आगे की नहीं
transform the
सोची
war. Because suddenly, this wasn't just about preserving the Union, it was about freedom itself.
हद
But
मचाएगा
then
साथ भैया
came
हद
Gettysburg, the bloodiest battle of the war, where Lincoln delivered a speech that lasted just 2
क्या
minutes.
ही बोले हैं
But those
क्या
2
नहीं
minutes
बोले हैं
still
समझ में
echo
ना
through
आती मेरे को।
history. 407 years
WWE
ago,
खिलवा
our
रहे हैं
fathers brought forth on this
लड़के
continent a new nation, conceived in
जिंदगी
liberty
जहन्नुम बना
and
सकते हैं
dedicated to the proposition that all men
करें तो
are
करें
created
काम नहीं
equal.
करें
272 words. That's all it took to remind America what it was fighting for. And when the war finally ended, Lincoln called for malice toward none, charity for all, urging the nation to heal rather than seek revenge. But tragically, Lincoln never got the chance to see it through. Just 5 days after Robert E. Lee surrendered, Abraham Lincoln went to Ford's Theater to see a play when John Wilkes Booth crept into the presidential box and shot him in the back of the head. Honest Abe died the next morning at 56 years old, and his body was placed on a funeral train that traveled across the country so Americans could say goodbye. And man, I just wish Lincoln could see the impact he had on his fellow Americans. Because millions lined the tracks to watch the funeral train pass, silent, grieving, and watching as the man who saved the Union would never see it rebuilt. But Lincoln's legacy lives on. He's carved into marble in Washington, stamped onto the penny and the $5 bill, etched into Mount Rushmore, and forever embedded in the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery once and for all. He kept America one nation and proved that the promise of liberty was worth dying for. But before we shed any more tears, it's time to recognize number one, the father of our country.